This conversation with Tom Harbour of the U.S. Forest Service was filmed in their headquarters in Washington, D.C., across the street from the Washington Monument. Mr. Harbour was nearing the end of his 46-year career with the agency, and it was just 2 weeks before his retirement date. He had been the National Director of Fire and Aviation for the last 11 years, coordinating the efforts of 10,000 firefighters. This is part 2 of a 3-part series of the interview filmed in the National Fire Desk Room in their national headquarters. How many firefighters will the Forest Service have in 2016?
10,000. We're going to try to stay. We had 10,480. We cut back to 10, and we're trying to stay at that 10,000 level. It's been 3-4 years ago. We had to drop a few engines. You know, that's another thing, Bill, you're acquainted with because you think about it and write about it. As the character of public lands changes, as we get more thoughtful and discreet about the kinds of objectives we want on public lands, future directors, future chiefs of the Forest Service, I'm certain are going to undertake force restructuring. So right now we've got 10,000 firefighters, we got about 900 engines, we got 110 hotshot crews, we've got 350 smoke jumpers, you know, yada yada. Those numbers and that structure will change and adapt into the future, and so will that number of firefighters. But we'll have 10,000 here, I think, the next couple of years.
Will the Forest Service make use in the future of technology that will allow the real-time tracking of the location of firefighters and the fire that they're fighting?
Yeah, you know, you and I have both done a bunch of thinking about the kinds of future we want for our firefighters. I want to make sure we invest as much on the front end in terms of thinking about what we want folks to accomplish as we do on the technology side. I'm worried that because of our technological attraction, that we may make a move next to invest in technology. Absent that move, you know, so we'd know where a person was, but we still wouldn't have a good idea of what we want them to do. I want to try to front-end load, you know, we've taken to calling it the big Y, W-H-Y. I want to front-load the big Y, and then in a very measured way, move into technology. We face so many challenges in the federal government, in the Forest Service in particular, because of the technological knotholes we face in terms of how we manage data, how we extract data, how we analyze data. It's the challenge we're facing with UASs right now. It's the challenge, Bill's one of the few folks that reads the QFR. You'll remember in the most recent QFR, we talked about the challenge of technology and the fact that perhaps between Interior and the Forest Service, we need some kind of a chief technology officer, so that as things like UASs and personal locator devices and personal health, respiratory, heart rate, Fitbit things, you know, all this is coming down the pike, and segmentally, I see it all. I see this explosion. You know, you think back when you and I started, and we were so tickled when we got one of those, you know, Motorola radios that were what, yay by, you know, that high, and I don't know what those suckers weighed, 10 or 15 pounds, you know, and now, Jiminy Willikers, smaller radios, cameras on everybody, the possibility of these locator devices. So yes, I certainly see that into the future. I'm worried about getting after the big Y first. And then I also want to make sure, because I've had the experience and opportunity of dealing with my friends at the Pentagon, and I want the wildland fire services, especially the Forest Service, because that's where I've spent all my career, to have a real good idea about where and how they're going to manage that kind of data, so that, you know, in the current world, sure, the DIVS could see where each of the firefighters are on their division, but if the DIVS can see it, probably the OSC1 and the PSC1 can see it, and the ICT1 can see it, and probably with a few more filters, you know, the chief of the Forest Service can see it. So what we all realize we can't do, you know, 1970, 71, we don't want to be getting on the radio saying, you know, Mr. Gabbert, Bill, you know, go 50 feet to the left there. We want to figure out how to utilize and manage that, and I sure haven't been able to get my head around the specifics of doing that, but I know we're going to have to embrace technology more. We're going to have to get after the big Y. We're going to have to marry that all together. We're no doubt, Bill, going to go through a significant period where, like we did with frequencies, private, local, state, fed, I just bet you on some of these things like personal locator devices, I bet you, despite our best thinking about, you know, let's stay coordinated, I bet you in 5 years, less, maybe 5 to 10 years, you and I are reading stories about, you know, 7 different systems on one fire, which, yeah, might tell you where everybody is, but they can't all talk to one another. So I read enough to know your heart's in the right place. I too want to know where every firefighter is. I want them to know where they are in relationship to the flaming front. I think that's an important part of what we'll do, what we'll be able to do in the short term. I just want to make sure we fit it into a big system that enables us to really move seamlessly into the future.
Talk to me about Smokejumpers. Where do they fit into fire management today, and do they still have as much value as they did 30 years ago, and compare them to helicopter-borne firefighters?
Yeah, fascinating discussion that we've been engaged in over our careers about each of these components of what we do. I'm a firm believer in diversity, and you can take that into the individual personal aspects of things, but I'm a big believer in healthy, diverse ecosystems and in healthy, diverse firefighting tools that we see. I think we've got significant debates about locations and numbers, But there's no question in my mind that I see smoke jumpers going into the future. You tracked, and we have talked about the significant tactical change that I've insisted on in the Forest Service with this move from the FS-14 into a square parachute. And I wouldn't have gone through that fuss, I wouldn't have gone through that if in my private times, darkest hours, you know, if I thought there was going to be no program in 10 or 20 years, I never would have gone through all that fuss. But I believe that smoke jumpers are a tool that we're going to utilize into the future. I believe that smoke jumpers have a role in terms of fast response with numbers over long distances with highly trained folks. I haven't explained well, obviously, about my sense that smoke jumpers could be inserted into the WUI as a Type 3 team. You know, not as smoke jumpers, but you need a Type 3 capacity on a fast-moving WUI fire. I could see inserting a group of smoke jumpers, not necessarily for their capacity as a hand crew, as I could for capacity for overhead. And those are the kinds of things that I think smoke jumpers are going to serve into the future. Sure, we're going to always have smoke jumpers have gotten tired of me talking about the two-manner in the bob, you know, and that's not their future. But I hope I've made it clear to them that I think there's going to be a role for smoke jumpers for that two-manner in the bob in the future, because there likely is going to be a time when we determine a set of objectives, a why, and we want more than remote sensing data coming from a fire. We want people in their judgment, and I can see smoke jumpers on a two-manner in the bob, but it's not going to be their forte. Their forte is going to be that quick reaction, large numbers, highly qualified folks into the future. And so you bet, I see jumpers into the future.
This year, as in previous years, there were fatalities and serious injuries when firefighters were definitely trying to protect structures. But that's not the primary responsibility of the Forest Service. So how do we deal with that in the future?
We've questioned ourselves, continued to question ourselves. Bill, you asked me earlier about the most difficult, trying part of this job, and it's those fatalities. And so we work now in an environment that's much different than when we started. You know, I didn't go south maybe fall of '72 or something, might have been the first time I went south. So I wasn't on the Cleveland in 70, 71, 72 when you were, and guys tell me we were protecting WUI even back then. I was on the Stanislaus, and so we didn't have a lot of worry off the green ground, off the National Forest System land. And now we do. Now we work in a system where the blessing of it is we're extraordinarily interagency. And the watch out is now that this system we've designed enables a battalion chief from Rapid City not only to come out and help us on our fires, but then when Rapid City has some kind of WUI incident, you know, Tatanka goes to help Rapid City. Well, what happens now when that same qualified BC with Rapid City puts a hotshot crew in a situation where you know, there's structures, and that's happening more and more. We're asking ourselves, even last week and a couple of weeks ago, to make sure our folks know about rules of engagement, our folks know about, we've called it the turn down protocol, but it's in the IRPG and others as what properly refusing risk. Our folks know that. We want to make sure that in this newer, more complex environment, that when our folks go to take an action, they not only understand that big why, but they're operating within the limits and bounds of what they've been trained to do. And that's the challenge of the interface, as well as, Bill, as you know, getting homeowners, private landowners to redeem their responsibility, getting local and state government engaged. When you got assigned and I got assigned, when these young women and young men today get assigned, we want to put them in a position where they can succeed. The whole goal of what we do is to thrive and survive in a complex and uncertain environment. And by swimming upstream with objectives, by swimming upstream and trying to be a little bit more thoughtful about where we put these folks, how homes are constructed, how communities are constructed, the condition of the grasslands and forest lands that we ask them to take action in, we can do a lot to make sure the future is better for young folks.
Could you name one or two things briefly that we could do to prevent fatalities in the future or reduce the number of fatalities?
Sure. You know, I think one of the things we need to continue to do is to listen to the operators. We had a very interesting discussion last week about asking ourselves whether or not we ought to get to a place where instead of the default being that you and I go, and then we try to figure it out later, maybe these operators are now telling us that given the complexity of the situations they're in, maybe we preload that. Maybe we tell you, Mr. Gabbert, you and Palomar, here's what we want you to do, and in the environment that you're going to be in, you're going to go or you're not going to go. You know, you're going to take the assignment or not. I like this thinking, listening to the operators about really trying to describe better our expectations of them. That's one. In fact, I'll hand you three, because let me swim way upstream and tell you adoption of what we've called risk management protocols. I'm convinced we need to be better practitioners at risk management. And then the third thing I'll tell you, it gets back to this big why. You've heard me talk about doctrine. I think we really have got some work to do on defining doctrine. And I think listening to the operators, practicing better risk management, and then at the top of that food chain, really thinking about doctrine. I think all three of those things are going to help initial attack firefighters. We've gotten to the point, Bill, where we've got the best equipped, best trained folks in the world, and now I want to see what we can do about better engaging the brain.
Why did it take 10 years to start rebuilding the air tanker fleet after it declined from 44 in 02 to 9 in 2012?
Yeah, because complex problems like that, complex problems that are going to take a significant investment in money, take a lot of time to work out. So last year we made an investment of over $200 million in aviation, trying to go from where we were after the 2001 crashes to where we are today. That took a lot of time to work through solving a complex problem.